All right, let me discuss our next two business entities, the limited liability company and the corporation. Now, we'll talk about the limited liability company first. A limited liability company is what they call a hybrid entity. It combines, supposedly, the best advantages of a corporation for protecting you from liability and also the best advantages for tax purposes, as that's similar to a partnership. Now you're asking, what are the tax benefits from a partnership? Well, the tax benefits from a partnership are simply just pass-through taxation. Pass-through taxation means that you're essentially only paying taxes once. The LLC essentially acts as a pass-through entity where the income that's earned is passed on to the individual and or the groups of members that are involved in the LLC, and then they pay those taxes. But the LLC also provides the protection of a corporation. Now, what sort of protections does a corporation give you? Let's discuss that for a little bit. A corporation is an official entity registered with the state where the entity is incorporated. We discussed that a little bit when we were talking about long arm statutes in the past. Businesses in the United States usually register inside of each state. For example, you can register in Florida, or you can register in Delaware. You pick the state where you wish to be incorporated for your business activities. Some states require you to actually have a physical address when you register in that state, so it's not just easy. You can't just pick and choose. Sometimes you actually have to have a physical address somewhere. But the key is you register your corporation. Once you do that, you file paperwork regarding that corporation. For a company, it's the Articles of Incorporation. The Articles of Incorporation discuss what's involved in the business entity, the corporation's goals, who has an interest in the corporation, and the corporation's prime purposes for existence. Now, the corporation, thus, after that, files for its own tax ID number and is essentially a separate entity in and of itself from the people who started or who have an interest in the company. Now, why is that important? It's important for liability purposes. Once again, we go into the example of, let's say something wrong happens at a business. Let's say it's a grocery store and a corporation owns a grocery store. Somebody trips and falls in the grocery store. The person who suffered the injury wants to sue the grocery store. Well, they sue the corporation. They don't sue the shareholders or the people who have the interest in the corporation. So they go after the assets of the corporation. That means the only assets that are available to be sued or available to compensate the individual for their pain and suffering are the assets that belong to the corporation themselves, not the assets that belong to people who have an interest in the company. Now, this may seem a little bit complicated, but we're going to go over this in greater detail during class, but I just wanted to get you guys introduced to the idea as well. A limited liability company thus shares that element where it's a separate entity, it has its own tax ID number, etc., and it's treated as essentially a separate entity from the individual or individuals who started it. An LLC, as opposed to having articles of incorporation, has what's called articles of organization. Those individuals do the same thing where they define the parameters of how the limited liability company will interact. But the key is, with an LLC, you have direct pass-through taxation. The taxes, the money that the LLC earns, is directly passed on to the individual's income tax return, and they pay taxes on that directly. Now, why is that tax important? Because when you go over to the realm of the corporation, a corporation sometimes can suffer what's called double taxation, meaning that the profits the company earns are taxed, and then any money that the company then issues as dividends or payments to the people who have an interest in the company can then also be taxed as well. So essentially, sometimes you can pay two taxes. Now, funny enough, there's a way to avoid that sometimes with a corporation by filing what's called an S-Corp. An S-Corp allows a corporation to have pass-through taxation. I know it's getting complicated, but luckily I posted a little video after this from another individual, a CPA this time, that can help explain that sometimes you shouldn't let the tax implications of how you want your business to be to guide you. Sometimes you should let the other elements of what you want your business to be like to guide you. As a reminder, I'm going to have a guest speaker also come in on class on Monday to help us see how to open up a business here in Florida and the issues and ways to avoid liability when setting up the business here in Florida. So I will see you guys on Monday, and we'll continue our discussion with business entities. Thank you so much, and make sure to watch the last video. Bye.